Here's some interesting news. The marriage rate is down, the birth rate is down, and more people than ever are choosing to live alone. In the 25 to 29 age group, 48% of women were unmarried in 2008, up from 12% unmarried in 1970. For men in 1970, 20% were unmarried. In 2008, 61% were unmarried. My guest today is writer Debbie Slevin. Debbie wanted desperately to be a grandmother, but her 30-something daughter just didn't seem interested in a serious relationship or in having a child. Debbie wondered if her daughter was symbolic of a new trend, and she embarked on a study that resulted in her new book, Unpregnant Pause, Where Are the Babies? She explored an interesting twist of feminism. Did we raise our daughters to be so empowered by choice that in the choosing of career, they might miss their chance for children altogether? Stay with us as we learn what Debbie's research reveals. I'm Alice Bloom. This is A Town in Village 2. Welcome back. Debbie, thank you so much for being my guest. Now, you've spent a lot of time doing this research, and I felt your anguish as I was reading the book. I think we're of similar ages, and I think that I have a 30-something-year-old daughter in a similar situation. Define for us who the unpregnant woman is.
The unpregnant woman is those women who are in their mid to late 30s and early 40s who have been so immersed in their career that they only then stop to look and say, I want a family. I thought I was going to meet somebody. I didn't meet somebody. Oops, my fertility is just flittering away.
Because the reality is it is harder to become pregnant after 40s, for sure, or even in your late 30s.
My doctors pretty much affirmed for us, and as I was doing the research, that it starts to get hard after 35. And by 38, one of the doctors said, you're driving the car off the cliff, which is pretty horrible to hear.
But, of course, there are a lot of enhanced techniques that help women.
And they're expensive.
Well, having a child is expensive.
Yes, it is. And the women who go through this really desperately want babies of their own so that they're willing to commit. They use credit cards. Some of them are very upscale women who can easily afford to. Parents help.
Wow. But your daughter is younger.
Yes.
And of course, we don't want to talk specifically about her. She's got the right to privacy here. However, this was very interesting to me that the young gals maybe are sublimating the truth or ignoring the fact that they should be thinking about this early on.
I don't know that they're ignoring it. I really think they just haven't thought about it. They were raised to believe that they could do whatever they want. They could be doctors or lawyers or MBAs. And so we empowered them so much. This is my problem with this. We wanted them to have all these choices and empower them that I don't think we ever gave the same message. I know I didn't. I didn't say to my daughter, and you know what? Being a mother is the greatest thing in my life. I said to her, be independent, be able to make your own choices, and you'll be fine. And then they get towards the end of their fertility and they look around and think, oh, I didn't think about this.
Well, but what about the gals who do think about it and maybe have decided that that's not the route they want?
Right, and there are many of them. And, you know, a lot of the women talk about, are you single by choice or by chance? And yes, a lot of them are single and motherless. Not mothers, by choice. But there are those who just thought it would happen. And a lot of their stories are in the book where they would say, I thought I would meet him. I thought I would work, I would go out and socialize. I would meet him somewhere along the way. And it didn't happen. Or the other story, which is an unbelievable story, are the ones who've had proposals and the guy just wasn't right. You know, he was nice, but he wasn't right. I thought I could do better. And life goes on, and they've had one woman in the book had 3 proposals. Just couldn't find the right guy.
Well, you know, I call it the Seinfeld Effect. You know, the kind of thing where there's something wrong with everybody, and there is something wrong with everybody. Making a choice means agreeing to live with certain things you don't like because there are so many more things that you do like. I mean, I think that most people aren't looking for romantic love, or don't, or maybe are more realistic about that, or am I wrong?
They are. No, I think they're looking for romantic love. I think they were brought up on the Cinderella fantasy.
Or Sex in the City?
Or Sex in the City, that too. But that they thought they'd be swept off their feet. They thought it would be perfect. And once they're making their own money, they don't want anything less than perfect. Because why should I settle? I can pay my own rent. I can pay my own mortgage. I can travel by myself or with my girlfriends. I'm not going to settle. And then after they've turned down a couple of really maybe nice guys because they wouldn't settle, they start to think about, well, how am I going to build this family? You know, I wonder if we taught that much about compromise. I think we taught a lot about empowerment, but not really stressing that nothing is perfect. You have to compromise.
Or maybe you made a very poignant point that affected me a great deal, and that was you don't need to have a partner to have a baby these days. Our gals are raised to be able to take care of themselves financially, so you don't need to have a partner for someone to take care of you. But isn't life better when you've got a partner to share those decisions and the life's milestones and the ups and the downs of things and the support?
And the amazing thing is in all the interviews, women defended their position across the board. I wanted my own life. I wanted to do it this way. At the end of every single interview, every single one, they said, but I don't want to be alone. I want somebody to share my life with. So I think it's coming at them at a point where they're feeling not desperate, but that they've missed that piece of it. And now that they are having these single, independent, wonderful lives, they realize it'd be really nice to share it.
Do you think we made a mistake as parents, one, not communicating the benefits of a good relationship, but also saying that things aren't perfect, but also there's a message that when you're so strong, I mean, we got a different message from our mothers, which was, and I think you make this point very effectively, you should have a career, but if that doesn't work out so great, there'll be somebody to take care of you. It's sort of a fallback position. So teach or do something that, you know, you can sort of fit in around everything else. Where our message to our daughters was, work first. Your career is the most important thing. And somehow we didn't communicate the other part.
I think that's really true. The girls in that bracket that I looked at grew up when divorce was at its highest. And they did not see such successful marriages in film, on television, in books. So they also embraced this idea that they needed to make the life they wanted to live and were not willing to compromise. So, yeah, I think so.
Well, how do you reconcile that with, you just alluded to the point that many of these gals saw very unhappy marriages, either in their own family, their mother's situations that either ended in divorce, or unhappy marriages that nobody did anything about, and the stress was something they lived with all the time. I think that must play a part because these gals are also raised to be in control. And there are obviously, as we know, times when you're just jumping off a cliff. I mean, having a baby is is throwing caution to the wind.
Nobody knows what that's really like.
And we were talking a little earlier about birth plans and all of that. You know, the old saying, "Man plans, God laughs," and sometimes that works out, but lots of times it doesn't. And these gals don't think that they want to put themselves in a situation where they don't have control.
Right. I think that's very true. I think it's our fault. I really do, and that's probably not a popular opinion. But to a certain degree, one of the things I say in my book is, did feminism bite us in the ass? And I feel like in my case, maybe a little, because I was so strong about having my daughter feel empowered. And many of the women I know were. We wanted them to just have all the choices that maybe we didn't feel we had. And with that comes this, I don't know, you can't do everything at once. You can't have it all. So if you're going to be doing that,
all those commercials are wrong.
Well, I don't believe you can. I think you can have it sequentially, But I don't know that you can have it all at the same time
But that
unless you
means-
have an amazing, amazing nanny.
Well, I mean, some people do it, but not without stress.
Right.
And something is compromised. Um, and sometimes I think the media, and I think you point this out, as you say, the media presents unhappy marriages or unrealistic situations. I know I find myself in a situation of counseling young women, just friends who just happen to be younger, people who aren't so happy in their jobs because they're not taking on the challenges they want, but their kids are very young.
Right.
And sometimes I say, well, yeah, but if you keep your hand in now, he's going to be in school full time in a couple of years, and then you can advocate for something more rigorous or a bigger challenge. But you've kept your hand in the ring, so to speak.
For sure. And I also don't think, not that I know of, that women spend a lot of time talking about how great motherhood is. And this really throws me back into the very traditional mode. But I know I didn't. I remember saying, you know, you should go to school and you should work hard, all these things. Right. I didn't say the coolest thing ever is having a baby and watching that baby grow, or, you know, breastfeeding a baby, which, you know, if you can, great. If you can't, I don't make any judgments.
Well, but bonding with that
but
baby.
But it's an amazing thing to go through that early process. I never said that to my daughter, oh, by the way, look how great this is as I'm raising you.
Well, you know, I think you make another point in the book, too, and that is the tremendous burden that child rearing has become, the cost involved, and the expectations for what a mother is supposed to be doing. I remember thinking, I didn't know I needed to know every word on the spelling test to be a good mother. And I guess the terms are helicopter parents, there's so many things like that, but certainly in communities that are more affluent, the expectation is that parents know everything that child is doing, and you spend a good deal of your time taking your child to the special lessons and after-school programs. I think it's Garrison Keillor who did a wonderful riff on this when he had a later marriage, and he had a grown daughter, and he said, boy, now having a child is having a third job.
It is.
And I think some of the girls may see that and say, how do I do that? I'm taught to take care of me. I want my time.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think we've, again, I feel like we've raised them to feel entitled, and the next generation even more so, that they should be happy. And a lot of the mothers I interviewed, that was a comment that came up over and over again. I just want her to be happy. I don't care whether she marries or she has children, she should just be happy. And then they grow up thinking, well, this makes me happy or this doesn't make me happy, so I'm going to do what does make me happy.
Well, also happiness. I mean, are we looking at a long-term happiness? Or do we have to be happy every minute? Is that a reasonable expectation?
I think some children think it's a reasonable,
children
you know,
do,
but I think some of the parents feel that their child should be happy all the time and get very upset. You see the young mothers, don't be upset, don't be upset. That sometimes, you know what? I'm sorry, you're unhappy. You're going to need to be unhappy until we get home and we can make you happy.
Well, I think it's a cultural thing. I recall a teacher asking me if my then 6-year-old first grader was happy. And I never, I mean, he seemed happy.
You hope they're happy.
It never occurred to me that that was a very important academic need. I mean, I didn't want him to be unhappy for sure, but I thought that would be clear if he was really unhappy. But I said, gee, I never thought about that. Nobody ever asked if I was happy.
But I was going to say, isn't that a very modern value?
I think so.
That you can only worry about if you're happy
Right.
if you are well taken care of and sheltered and well fed. Happy comes along after all those necessities are filled. So it's kind of an indulgence to believe that you should always be happy. First, you should be cared for and safe.
Well, and then look at the issue if a child may not be happy studying for a spelling test. Hey, is that a bad thing?
Right.
We cope with that, and then we go out to play ball.
Right, and they could be in the very best school in America and unhappy, but they don't understand the long term.
Well, we digress a little bit. Is
benefits.
unpregnant a U.S. problem, or is this worldwide?
It is a worldwide problem. I think, I wouldn't call it a problem. Let's backtrack.
Okay.
You know, I don't know that I'd call it a problem, but it's definitely a phenomenon, but it is relegated to cities. And that was an interesting thing I found out. It's relegated to metropolitan areas as a result of young women who come from more rural areas. They migrate towards the cities to fulfill themselves, to have better jobs and more aggressive careers. And then they get there and they get wrapped up and discover there are way more women in the cities than there are men. A new phenomenon that has turned up recently is that there are more college-educated women than there are men, and women do not want to date men who are less educated than they are. So you knock off, in the cities, you knock off the gay population, so there are less men, and then you knock off the ones that are not as well educated, and the women outnumber the men by a lot. But many of these women did not start out in metropolitan areas. And it's true in Italy, in Rome, it's true in Great Britain, it's true, the major metropolitan cities in the US. And actually, I tried really, really hard to find it other places where it was true, and the stats drop completely when you get out of the major cities.
And we don't see these young women moving away from the city when they're perhaps ready to settle down.
No.
This isn't just a fling. Or
Not if they're going to pursue their careers. They migrate to those places which have the most fast-paced, aggressive career tracks.
Do you think that men are afraid or intimidated by accomplished, powerful women?
For sure. And I think they would say no. And about halfway through the book, I decided I was not originally going to interview men. And it occurred to me, how am I telling this story without interviewing men? It was ridiculous. So I started interviewing men. And one of the people I interviewed is a man who runs a dating website called Check Your Fridge. And he kept stressing the point that the dude wants to be the dude. And even if he can be with a woman who has just as high-powered a career, makes more money, he still wants to be the dude. And he wants to open the door, and he wants to feel stronger, and that he protects her. So I took that, and when I interviewed the men, I would say to them, what are you looking for in a woman? And basically it started with attractive and smart. Attractive, smart. It never went smart, attractive. So that was an interesting finding. But when push came to shove and I said to them, what do you think about the dude wants to be the dude? And again, across the board, they said, yes, I want to be the man. Now, here comes the big problem. What the man is, what the role of the man is now, has changed. And I think men are having a bit of a crisis. If I'm not the protector, if I'm not the financial majority earner, then what am I? What do I bring to the table? And I think that's where women and men are struggling now.
Do you think that parents of males have dropped the ball in educating them to be perhaps the nurturing person that maybe they need to be because the old role is not working anymore?
That's an interesting question. I don't know that I could answer that definitively. I can answer it by saying one of the things that's interesting that my daughter has said is I won't settle for anybody less than the kind of men my brothers are, which is a great statement that they are family-minded, they are caring, but they still want to be the dude. I see that in their homes, and they have strong wives.
Do you think that we've extended adolescence longer than it used to be? I understand wanting to be the dude, and you see that as sort of an adolescent thing, later teenagers or young 20s, but then you watch people evolve and become a little bit more relaxed or start to see themselves. You fall into different roles that are needed. How many men thought they might change a diaper? I'm sure if you ask any 20-year-old, I'll never do that. But until you have that child and appreciate, how loving and wonderful it is, changing a diaper is not necessarily great, but it's something that you do because it gets you to the other side.
I think that's really changing. I spend a lot of time, I take my grandson to the park, I take him to activity classes, and they are filled with dads. And you see the dads, 2 seconds, they whip out the diaper, they do the whole thing.
They do what needs to be done.
Men have evolved hugely, I think, in childcare. There's no more this, I'm babysitting for my child. The dad is taking care of the kid that day.
But if you asked a 30-year-old male, are you interested in having a baby or being a father? What's your conclusion about how most people do?
The men that I interviewed all want to be parents. And when I say to them, well, what are you looking forward to? They say, I'm interested in coming home and going out to the ball field and coaching, and I'll coach the girls and I'll coach the boys. But they find this activity as the draw. They do not talk about sitting on the floor and reading a book or changing diapers
But
or
do you
bath
think
time.
that's different? I mean, if you had asked our husbands the same
No,
question
I don't. I think
35 years ago, would they have said, "Oh, I can't wait to just, cuddle that baby"?
no, I don't think that's changed, but I do think the men have evolved in that they're more capable of it. And I think the women have given them the opportunity, which is a huge thing. I know very early on I would say to my husband, let me do it, because it was faster. Now women say, no, go ahead. And the men learn to do it, and they become just as capable at some of those skills that women thought were traditionally women's skills.
Well,
but
or
yes, they do
responsibilities.
want to share the thing that they enjoy. So I
Now,
get that.
You also talked about religion. Let's talk a little bit about that and the role that plays in wanting to marry or wanting to relationship. If I'm reading this correctly, you felt that most people were avoiding religious ritual. And that was one of the reasons they were reluctant to enter into marriage, because they only saw it possible to either create their own ritual or
Right.
they had to reject what was their parents' ritual.
I think that kids today, 20s, 30s, they're not kids, they're adults, have grown up in a world where they see the greatest conflicts are based on religion. I think we see it every single day. And it has taken them away from religion. Not just mixed marriages, racially or religiously, but the whole idea of some of the traditions. They've created their own, they've combined. I interviewed a priest who said he used to do 5 weddings, church weddings a week. And now he's hopeful that he does that many in a season, that it has just dropped off. And people are not marrying. I just got statistics today, and this is not a religious statistic, but out of Great Britain, that 52% of children are born in homes where the parents are married, which means 48% are born out of wedlock. That is up dramatically in 10 years because people are feeling, I don't need to get married. I can have this child, I can love you, we can cohabitate and make it work. I don't need that piece of paper. And the rates are high here too.
They are. I think celebrities have had something to do with that.
Yeah.
Of course, not everybody has the resources that most celebrities have, and I think that it's probably a given that it takes a lot to raise a child, both emotionally and financially, for sure. And it's nice to share that with somebody. But we see so many of those famous unwed people then marrying
Right.
sometime after the child's or children are born.
Yeah, I think that's true too. But I think what we've seen is there's no longer the first marriage. The first marriage is the living together, this having a relationship, and then breaking up. And then in their 30s, they meet somebody else as a new relationship. And that first marriage is what traditionally, in our generation, was the second marriage.
Okay. Now then there's the impact of the hookup culture.
Right.
The casualness and the kind of feeling that it's okay to not have any commitment in intimacy. In fact, you are embarrassed if you are, if you do feel emotionally connected.
But the craziest statistic of hookup culture, it's not even a statistic, that the girls said they would not hook up with somebody who they saw as a potential mate.
Huh.
So it was fine if you knew it was going to be a one-night stand and you wouldn't have to look at the guy again, or friends with benefits. But if you really thought you wanted to marry him, you didn't hook up with them, which was a really interesting, curious piece on
Interesting, because how would you know even at that point until you knew somebody a little bit more whether you wanted to?
Well, I think there's an embarrassment factor. You don't want to be looked at, the girl does not want to be looked at as somebody who would hook up.
What's the emotional cost of not marrying?
I think it depends on the woman. Some women are very happy. I had somebody say to me, I could not allow a man into my apartment now for anything. I love my life. I don't want to pick up after him. If I got married, he'd have to keep his place and I would keep mine and we'd visit. I was like, okay, it's an interesting way to go.
One way. But does an unmarried woman or a woman without children have different status in our culture?
For sure. I think, and this was said by one of the women who I interviewed who had some very interesting things to say. She's in her early 40s, been through many cycles of fertility treatment, trying to have a baby on her own. And she said that society gives greater value to the women who are married. It means that somebody has chosen them. And that sense of being chosen gives them greater status. in our society, and there's a certain amount of shame on the woman who was not chosen. She makes the point that a lot of single women, even in their 30s and 40s, could be put at the children's table at a holiday, or they're expected to sleep on the cot when there's a family, traveling event where the marrieds all get rooms. And I have to admit, I was guilty of that for a while. We just thought, all right, the boys get rooms and you'll come into our room on a cot. And then after I heard her say that, I was like, that will never happen again. I apologized to my daughter. I said, I'm really sorry. You will always have your own room, which is very, Virginia Woolf. But it's important to lift that shame from them and not make them feel they are less than their married siblings.
Just an aside, my daughter has found a way around that. She makes herself so unpleasant to live with. She is always given her own room. It's a good strategy to learn.
See?
I like to hope she learned that from her mother, but I think she learned it from her dad, which is funny. Now, with so many women being alone, the normal course of life is to age. So you're 30 and 40, and then it goes on and on, hopefully, for a nice long time. What's the consequence societally for women who are alone?
It's huge. It really is huge, because what happens when somebody gets sick? I think when they are still young enough to have parents who are active, the parents are the significant other. Mm-hmm. And as the parents start to age and the parents are needy, that falls often to the daughter. I mean, many sons are there for their parents. But when the daughter finishes taking care of their parent in assisted living, she goes home alone. And nobody's there to support her. And then take it one generation later, if there are no siblings, then there's really an issue. If there are siblings, it becomes the responsibility of the siblings. And one of the things I call for in the book, which is a very pragmatic thing, is to think in terms of long-term care, so that you know that you are protected. Particularly as women who are making good money, start early, get yourself a policy, and know that you will never be dependent on, the system for good care as you age.
It surprises me because most of these women have so many friends, and you would think the friends create family, create community, and I would like to think they take care of each other as much as they can. But maybe that doesn't really happen.
Well, I think they do to a point, but when they all start to age, when a generation reaches that point where they really do need assistance, there's only so much that they can do for each other. Two women living alone who are not that strong, one should fall, the other one cannot help them. And that could be true in a husband-wife couple too.
Sure.
But if there are children, you call your kids, somebody comes. It's going to change society going forward.
It'll be
with that
interesting
many
to
single
watch that.
people.
I
for
wish
sure.
we had more time, because I'd certainly like to talk about fertility and the designer babies that people are now thinking of, or just the way fertility is going, because they can design a baby. And perhaps, I know you mentioned something in the book about it may be a time where you will need to design a baby because your insurance may not cover you because you failed to screen for a flaw that could have been detected. So much more to talk about. The book is Unpregnant Pause, Where Are the Babies? Debbie, thank you so much for being my guest.
Thanks for having me.
It's been my pleasure. I'm Alice Bloom. We'll see you next time.